They call the Amazon rainforest the lungs of the earth. They tell you it breathes life into our planet, that it gives us the oxygen we need to survive. It's a beautiful, poetic lie. Ask any biologist who has actually spent time in the deep canopy, and they will tell you the truth. The Amazon doesn't give anything. It takes. Yes, the trees produce oxygen, but the forest is so dense, so teeming with billions of organisms, from the jaguars in the trees to the fungi in the soil, that it consumes almost every molecule of oxygen it creates. It is a closed loop, a selfish, hungry system that eats its own breath. And God help you if you step into that loop. My name is Captain Nightwhisper. We usually talk about deserts, ice caps, or the vacuum of space, places where emptiness kills you. But tonight, we are going to a place where life kills you, a place where there is too much biology, too much growth. In 2023, a joint task force consisting of DEA agents and US Army Special Forces deployed into a remote sector of the Peruvian Amazon. Their target was a new cartel that had stopped shipping cocaine and started guarding something far more valuable deep in the jungle. The mission was supposed to be a standard search and destroy, but 3 days after insertion, the satellite thermal imaging over their sector went cold. Not just the body heat of the soldiers, the heat of the forest itself changed. When the recovery team found the campsite, they didn't find bodies. At least, not in the way you understand death. They found men who had been replanted. Tonight, I am opening the file on Operation Green Hell. Put on your bug spray, check your boots for spiders, and whatever you do, don't lean against the trees, because in this forest, the bark has teeth. The insertion was supposed to be clean, a textbook drop. We flew in on 2 MH-60 Blackhawks, skimming just 20 feet above the canopy to stay under the radar. The target area was Sector 7G, a patch of the Peruvian Amazon so dense and remote that the locals didn't even have a name for it. They just pointed at the map and made the sign of the cross. I was the team lead for Alpha Squad. We had 6 men, 4 Special Forces operators, myself included, and 2 DEA agents, who were there to identify the high-value targets. The DEA guys, Miller and Ruiz, looked nervous. They were used to urban raids, kicking down doors in Bogota or Lima. They weren't used to this. The jungle doesn't have doors. It doesn't have walls. It just has endless, suffocating green. As the pilots flared the birds for the fast rope insertion, the heat hit us before we even touched the ground. It wasn't just hot, it was heavy. The air felt solid, like we were breathing warm soup. The humidity was sitting at 100%. The moment I slid down the rope and my boots hit the soft, decaying mulch of the forest floor, I felt the sweat instantly soak through my combat shirt. Alpha 1, this is Hawk 2. Birds are away. Good hunting. The pilot crackled over the comms. I watched the helicopters bank hard and disappear over the tree line. The sound of their rotors faded within seconds, swallowed by the density of the vegetation. And that was when I noticed the first anomaly: silence. Any veteran who has operated in a jungle environment, Vietnam, Panama, Colombia, will tell you one thing: the jungle is never quiet. It is the loudest place on earth. It is a constant cacophony of cicadas screaming, monkeys howling, birds calling, and leaves rustling. It is a wall of biological noise that never stops, day or night. But Sector 7G was dead silent. I held up a fist, signaling the squad to halt. We knelt in the mud, weapons raised, scanning the perimeter. I adjusted my electronic ear protection, turning the gain all the way up. I should have been deafened by the ambient noise of insects. Instead, I heard nothing but the blood rushing in my own ears and the ragged breathing of Agent Ruiz behind me. "Captain," Ruiz whispered, his voice trembling slightly, "where are the birds?" "Gone," I replied, keeping my eyes on the dense foliage ahead. "No, I mean, the birds, the animals. Why is it so quiet?" He was right. There were no mosquitoes buzzing around our faces, no ants crawling on the tree roots. It was as if we had stepped into a vacuum. The forest looked lush and alive. The ferns were massive, the vines were thick as pythons, but it felt sterile. It felt like a painting of a forest, not a real ecosystem. Check your corners. Move out, I ordered, pushing the unease to the back of my mind. We had a job to do. We moved in a standard ranger file, cutting our way through the undergrowth with machetes. The objective, the cartel's Camp Oculto, was 3 clicks to the north. According to the satellite thermal scans from 3 days ago, there were 50 armed men in that camp. But for the last 48 hours, the heat signatures had vanished. As we trekked deeper, the environment began to feel increasingly hostile. It wasn't just the terrain, it was the geometry of the place. The trees grew at strange angles, twisting into knots that looked painfully unnatural. The canopy above was so thick that it blocked out 95% of the sunlight, bathing us in a perpetual, sickly green twilight. My GPS was struggling to hold a signal, the coordinates jumping around erratically. After 2 hours of grueling marching, the smell hit us. Usually, a cartel camp smells like burning trash, diesel fuel, and unwashed bodies. But as we approached the perimeter of Camp Oculto, the air smelled sweet, overpoweringly sweet, like rotting fruit mixed with copper. It was a cloying, heavy scent that coated the back of your throat. "Masks up," I signaled. We didn't know if they were cooking meth or something worse. We breached the camp perimeter at 1400 hours. We expected resistance. We expected tripwires, claymores, or a sentry with an AK-47. We found nothing. The camp was perfectly intact. That was the most disturbing part. Tents were standing. A generator was humming nearby, powering a string of lights that were useless in the daylight. In the center of the clearing, a large metal pot was sitting on a propane stove. The flame was still lit. I walked over to the pot and looked inside. It was full of rice and beans. It had boiled over and burned to the bottom, a black, crusty mess, but it was still hot. "Clear the tents," I shouted. My men swept through the makeshift barracks. "Clear! Clear! Clear!" I walked into the command tent. It was a scene of interrupted life. There was a half-finished game of poker on the table. Cards were scattered, money was stacked in piles, and a cigarette had burned itself out in an ashtray, leaving a long cylinder of grey ash. And there were weapons everywhere. This is the detail that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Cartel sicarios do not leave their weapons. Their rifles are their life, their power. But here, expensive gold-plated AK-47s and AR-15 were leaning against chairs, lying on cots, and dropped on the muddy floor. It looked like the rapture had happened, like 50 men had simply vanished into thin air in the middle of a poker game. "Captain, you need to see this," called out Sergeant Miller, my point man. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, where the camp met the dense jungle wall. I jogged over to him. He was pointing at the ground. The mud in the clearing was churned up, but not by footprints. There were drag marks, deep, wide furrows in the earth, as if heavy sacks had been pulled forcefully towards the trees. But there were no boot prints alongside the drag marks. Whoever, or whatever, had dragged these men didn't walk on 2 legs, or if they did, they didn't leave tracks. I followed the lines with my eyes. They all led in one direction, deeper into the unexplored sector, into a part of the jungle that looked darker, denser, and more twisted than the rest. "Doc," I waved our medic over. "What do you make of this?" Doc crouched down and touched the mud near one of the drag marks. He rubbed the soil between his fingers and frowned. Then he pulled a chem light from his vest and cracked it, holding it close to the furrow. "Captain, look at the edges of the drag mark," Doc said quietly. I looked closer. The mud wasn't just pushed aside, it was punctured. Thousands of tiny, needle-like holes lined the trench, as if the thing dragging the bodies had millions of microscopic legs, or roots. "And look at this." Doc pointed to a small object half buried in the mud at the end of the track. I reached down and pulled it out. It was a tactical boot, a heavy leather combat boot, laced up tight. But it wasn't empty. Inside the boot, where the foot should have been, there was no bone, there was no blood. The boot was filled, packed tight, with a thick, fibrous root system. White and red tendrils had grown into the leather, consuming whatever foot had once been inside. I dropped the boot. It hit the ground with a wet thud. "They didn't leave," I whispered, realizing the horrifying truth of the silence. They were harvested. Suddenly, the radio on my shoulder crackled. It was Hawk 1, the pilot, circling 10 miles out at high altitude. Alpha 1, be advised. We are picking up a thermal spike in your sector. It's massive. But, Captain, it doesn't look like a heat signature. Clarify, Hawk 1, I said, gripping my rifle tighter. It looks like a biological bloom, sir. It's expanding, and it's coming from right underneath you. At that moment, the ground beneath our feet shifted. Not an earthquake, a breath. The jungle floor rose and fell an inch, exhaling that sweet, rotting smell of copper and death. We weren't hunting a cartel anymore. We were walking on the back of something else. We left the camp behind, following the drag marks into the thicket. The further we went, the more the jungle changed. The trees became taller, their trunks twisting into spirals that defied gravity. The canopy above was so thick that it blocked out the sky completely, plunging us into a green, subaquatic twilight. But it was the ground that disturbed me the most. We weren't walking on mud anymore. The soil had a spongy, elastic quality to it. Every step felt like walking on a layer of wet muscle buried under a thin carpet of moss. And with every footfall, a reddish liquid seeped up around our boots. It wasn't water. It was thick, viscous, and smelled unmistakably of iron. Captain, Miller whispered over the comms, his voice tight. Look at the bark on these trees. I stopped and shone my tactical light on the nearest trunk. It was a massive mahogany tree, or at least it used to be. The bark wasn't rough or flaky. It was smooth, dark, and warm to the touch. When I looked closer, I saw fine blue lines pulsing beneath the surface. Capillaries. The tree had a circulatory system. Don't touch anything, I ordered, pulling my hand back as if I had been burned. Gloves on, masks tight. Whatever this is, it's changing the ecosystem. It's not just changing it, Doc muttered, looking at his Geiger counter, which was clicking sporadically, not for radiation, but for something else, electromagnetic interference. It's rewriting it. We pushed forward for another 500 meters until the drag marks ended. They didn't just stop, they fanned out, leading into a circular clearing that looked like a manicured amphitheater. We froze. The clearing was filled with trees, but they weren't random. They were arranged in rows, spaced perfectly apart, like an orchard or a graveyard. And growing out of the base of each tree was a man. I have seen combat. I have seen what IEDs do to a convoy. I have seen what cartels do to informants, but I have never seen anything like this. There were about 30 of them. The missing cartel members. They were kneeling or sitting at the base of the trees, their backs pressed against the trunks. But they weren't tied up. They were merged. The bark of the trees had grown over their bodies, wrapping around their limbs like a second skin. It wasn't a violent process. It looked surgical. The wood had fused with their flesh. I saw an arm that started as human skin at the shoulder, turned into a rough, woody texture at the elbow, and ended in a branch with leaves at the fingers. Holy Mother of God, Ruiz gagged, stumbling back. Stay sharp, I hissed, raising my rifle. Check for vitals. We moved into the garden of flesh. The silence here was heavy, oppressive. The air was filled with golden dust motes, spores, that drifted lazily in the stagnant air. I approached the nearest victim. He was a young man, maybe 20. He was wearing the tattered remains of a soccer jersey. His legs were gone, completely absorbed into the root system of the tree. His chest was rising and falling in a shallow, agonizing rhythm. He's alive, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Doc rushed over, pulling out his medical kit. He tried to find a pulse on the man's neck, but he pulled his hand back in horror. Captain, his skin, Doc stammered. It's not skin anymore, it's cellulose, but it's soft, like a callus that covers the whole body. Doc pulled out a scalpel. I need to check the integration depth. If we can cut them out... No, the tree spoke. We all spun around, weapons trained on the young man. His head was tilted back, eyes staring blankly at the canopy. His mouth hadn't moved. The sound had come from his chest, a vibrating, woody rasp. Then his eyelids fluttered, but when they opened, there were no whites, no irises. His eye sockets were filled with a thick green gel, A tiny white flower was blooming from the corner of his tear duct. "Do not the man wheezed. His voice sounded wet, bubbling through the fluid. "The roots go to the heart." I knelt beside him, keeping my distance. "Who are you? What happened here?" The man's head rolled to the side, cracking like a dry branch. "We took the stone, the black stone. It woke up. It was hungry." "Where is the rest of your unit?" I asked. "Part of the garden. Now," he groaned. Then, a spasm of pain racked his body. The tree behind him seemed to tighten its grip. The bark around his chest contracted, squeezing him. He gasped, and a trickle of that same red sap leaked from his mouth. "Kill me." "We can get you out," Ruiz shouted, stepping forward with his machete. "We can chop it down." "Ruiz, stand down," I barked. But Ruiz was panicking. He swung the machete with all his strength, aiming for the thick root that had swallowed the man's legs. The blade hit the root with a dull thwack. It didn't cut wood, it cut meat. A geyser of hot, red blood sprayed from the tree root, covering Ruiz's face. The tree let out a sound, a low shriek like twisting metal, and instantly, the entire clearing reacted. Every tree in the orchard turned its head. 30 pairs of green, gelatinous eyes fixed on us. The branches above us began to shake violently, not from wind, but from muscle spasms. "You hurt the mother," the young man whispered. The flower in his eye bloomed rapidly, petals unfolding in seconds, releasing a puff of yellow dust directly into Doc's face. Doc fell back, coughing, clawing at his throat. "Burning! It's burning! Masks! Full seal! Now!" I screamed, pulling Doc back by his vest. The ground began to rumble again, stronger this time. The roots beneath our feet were moving, slithering under the moss like snakes. The trees were uprooting themselves, not walking, but shifting, dragging their human hosts with them, tightening the circle around us. "We need to move," Miller yelled, firing a burst into the canopy. The bullets hit the wood, but instead of splinters, red fluid exploded from the impact sites. The forest wasn't just cover anymore. The forest was the enemy. "Captain, look north," Miller pointed. Through the shifting trees, past the wall of flesh and bark, I saw it, looming in the distance, cutting through the green fog like an obsidian knife. A massive black pyramid. It had no vines on it, no moss. It was perfectly smooth, absorbing all the light around it. And from its apex, a thin beam of purple energy was pulsing into the sky, feeding the clouds. "The source," I said, hauling Doc to his feet. "We have to get to the structure. It's the only place the trees aren't growing." "Are you crazy?" Ruiz screamed, wiping the blood from his eyes. "We need to go back to the LZ." "Look behind you, Ruiz." He turned. The path we had come from was gone. The jungle had closed it. Thick, thorny vines had woven together in seconds, creating a wall of spikes. We were trapped in the garden. "We don't have a choice," I shouted over the sound of the screaming trees. "We push to the pyramid! Move! Move!" We ran. We ran through the nightmare orchard, dodging roots that lashed out like whips. I saw things I still can't explain. I saw a man whose head had been replaced by a giant pitcher plant. I saw a woman whose ribcage had burst open to reveal a nest of fern-like organs. And as we ran, I realized the terrifying truth of Sector 7G. This wasn't a mutation. This wasn't radiation. This was evolution on steroids. The forest had learned how to use us. We weren't the apex predators here. We were just fertilizer, high-protein soil. And the gardener was waiting for us in the Black Pyramid. We ran until our lungs burned. Behind us, the jungle was alive in the most literal sense of the word. The canopy was snapping shut like a Venus flytrap. Vines, thick as pythons and covered in thorns, lashed out from the undergrowth, trying to snag our ankles. We weren't fighting an enemy. We were fighting the geography itself. Ruiz was lagging behind. He was sobbing, his mind broken by what he had done in the clearing. "It bled," he kept screaming between gasps. "The tree bled." "Move, Ruiz! Don't look back!" Miller shouted, grabbing the DEA agent by his tactical vest and hauling him over a massive, pulsating root that blocked our path. We burst through a wall of ferns, and suddenly, the chaos stopped. It didn't taper off. It was severed. We stumbled out of the dense foliage and onto a barren, flat plain. It was a perfect circle, about 200 meters in diameter, creating a dead zone around the structure in the center. Here, the ground was not spongy or wet. It was covered in gray, volcanic ash. No grass, no moss, no insects. Even the air felt different, thin, cold, and smelling of ozone and static electricity. And there it was, the anomaly. The satellite images hadn't done it justice. From the air, it might have looked like a shadow or a glitch. From the ground, it was overwhelming. It was a pyramid, but not like the ones in Egypt or Mexico. It had no steps, no terraces. It was a perfect tetrahedron of smooth black stone that rose 300 feet into the green twilight. The material looked like obsidian, but it didn't reflect our flashlights. It drank the light. When I shined my beam on it, the light didn't bounce back. It just vanished into the black surface, as if the stone was a hole in reality. "Check your gear," I ordered, my voice echoing strangely in the open space. "Comms are dead, Captain," Miller reported, tapping his headset. "Just white noise, high-frequency static." "GPS is gone too," Doc added, staring at his wrist unit. "Look at the compass." I looked at his wrist. The needle wasn't pointing north. It was spinning, not randomly, but rhythmically. Clockwise for 3 seconds. Stop. Counterclockwise for 3 seconds. It was syncing with something inside that structure. "The jungle," Ruiz whispered, pointing back the way we came. I turned around. The wall of trees stood at the edge of the ash circle like an army waiting for an order. The vines were writhing, reaching out towards the gray soil, but they recoiled as if burned every time they touched the ash. "They can't come in here," I realized. "This soil, or this stone, it repels them." "Safe zone," Miller muttered, though he didn't sound convinced. "Let's hope so," I said. "We can't go back. We have to go in, find a defensible position, and wait for extraction to realize we're off the grid." We walked across the ash field. The silence was absolute. The crunch of our boots on the gray dust was the only sound in the world. As we got closer to the pyramid, I felt a vibration in my teeth, a low, subsonic hum that seemed to come from the ground itself. There was an entrance at the base of the pyramid, no doors, no gates, just a triangular opening, perfectly cut, pitch black. It looked like a mouth waiting to be fed. We stacked up at the entrance. "Lights on. Watch your fire. We don't know what's in there." We stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. Outside, it was a humid 40 degrees Celsius. Inside, it was freezing, maybe 10 degrees. Our breath steamed in the beams of our tactical lights. The interior was not a tomb. It was a corridor. The walls were made of the same light-absorbing black stone, but here, they were lined with veins of a dull, silver metal. The floor was smooth, seamless, and polished to a mirror finish. "This isn't Inca," Doc said, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and scientific awe. "The architectural precision, the tolerances are less than a millimeter. You can't fit a sheet of paper between these blocks. We can barely do this with CNC machines today. This is supposed to be thousands of years old." "Focus, Doc," I snapped. "Miller, take point. Ruiz, stay in the middle. Don't touch the walls." We moved deeper into the structure. The corridor spiraled downwards. We weren't going up into the pyramid. We were going under it. The hum got louder. It wasn't just a vibration anymore. It was a rhythm. Thrum, thrum, thrum. It sounded like a massive generator idling. After descending for what felt like 20 minutes, the corridor opened up into a massive central chamber. Our flashlights couldn't reach the ceiling. It was a cathedral of shadows. But we weren't alone. "Contact!" Miller shouted, raising his rifle. We all aimed at the center of the room. There were crates stacked there. Modern plastic crates, green and black. "Hold fire," I said, lowering my weapon slightly. "That's Pelican cases." We approached the pile. It was a makeshift camp, set up right in the middle of this alien architecture. There were sleeping bags, MRE wrappers, and scientific equipment. spectrometers, laptops, drilling gear. But there were no people. I checked one of the laptops sitting on a fold-out table. It was dead, battery drained. But next to it was a leather-bound notebook. I opened it. It was written in Spanish. The handwriting on the first few pages was neat, precise. Towards the end, it became a frantic scrawl. "It's the cartel's chemists," Ruiz said, looking at a crate full of glass beakers. "They weren't cooking meth. They were analyzing something." I read the last entry in the notebook aloud, translating as I went. Day 14. The samples are reacting. The sap from the trees outside. It shares a genetic marker with the black stone. We thought the pyramid was a temple. We were wrong. It is a pump. It is pumping something into the groundwater. We tried to drill into the floor to find the reservoir. The drill broke, and then the wall started to sing. Jorge is gone. He walked into the wall, literally into it. The stone became liquid for a second and swallowed him. I closed the book. A cold shiver went down my spine. "Captain," Doc called out from the far side of the room. "You need to see the reliefs on the wall." I walked over. The walls of the chamber were covered in carvings, but they weren't pictures of gods or kings or jaguars. They were diagrams. Intricate, complex diagrams of biological structures. I saw double helixes, DNA strands, but they were wrong. They had 3 strands, not 2. I saw diagrams of cellular division. I saw carvings of humans, but they were shown being disassembled and put back together with plant matter. "It's an instruction manual," Doc whispered, tracing a carving that showed a human brain connected to a root system. "This place, it's a laboratory, a terraforming station." "Terraforming?" Miller asked. "You mean like making Mars habitable?" "No," Doc shook his head, his face pale. "Like making Earth habitable for something else. They are changing the biology of the planet, starting here. The forest outside, the garden, that's just the first crop." Suddenly, the hum changed pitch. It went from a low thrum to a high-pitched shriek. The silver veins in the walls flared with a purple light. The light didn't come from bulbs. It came from the stone itself. The room was illuminated in a sickly, ultraviolet glow. And then we saw them. In the corners of the room, standing in the shadows of the pillars, were figures. They weren't moving. They were perfectly still. They looked like statues made of wood and obsidian. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with elongated limbs and heads that had no faces, just a single, vertical slit. "Statues?" Ruiz asked, raising his weapon. "Please tell me they are statues." The purple light pulsed brighter. The slit on the face of the nearest figure opened. A sound came out, a mimicry of human speech, but distorted, layered, and metallic. It was Ruiz's voice. "It bled. The tree bled." Then another figure opened its face. It was my voice. "Check your corners. Move out." They were recording us. They had been listening since we entered the jungle. "Ambush!" I screamed. "Defensive circle! Open fire!" But before we could pull the triggers, the floor beneath us vanished. It didn't break. It just opened, like a camera shutter. We fell into the darkness below, screaming as the purple light swallowed us whole. We weren't in a temple. We were in the stomach of the machine, and digestion was about to begin. The fall wasn't long, maybe 20 feet, but the landing was wrong. We didn't hit stone. We didn't hit concrete. We hit something wet and yielding. I gasped for air. The wind knocked out of me and rolled onto my back. My tactical light flickered in the darkness, cutting through a thick, swirling mist. I expected to see the cold, geometric floor of the pyramid. Instead, I was lying on a carpet of pulsating, red vines. They looked like exposed intestines, thick as fire hoses, weaving together to form a floor that moved underneath us. "Sound off!" I choked out, scrambling to my feet. The air down here was thick with spores. It tasted like metal and ozone. "Miller up! Doc up! Ruiz? Ruiz? I'm here!" Ruiz whimpered from the shadows. "I lost my rifle. I can't find my rifle." "Forget the rifle. Draw your sidearm," I ordered. "Perimeter. Now!" We formed a tight triangle, backs to each other, weapons trained on the darkness. We were in a massive circular chamber, beneath the main level. The walls here weren't smooth obsidian. They were rough, organic, and covered in those same glowing violet veins we saw above. But here, the veins were pumping faster. And then, the whispering started. It didn't come from one direction. It came from everywhere. It bounced off the walls, echoing and distorting until it was impossible to pinpoint the source. "Miller, help me!" It was a woman's voice. Miller stiffened. "Captain, that sounded like... Baby, please, it hurts." "That's my wife," Miller whispered, lowering his aim. "How the hell? It's not her." I grabbed Miller's shoulder and shook him hard. "It's a mimic. Stay focused." The psychological warfare was brutal. The creatures knew us. They had absorbed the memories of the cartel men, and now they were digging into our minds. Then the mist parted. They stepped out of the shadows. The Guardians. Up close, they were terrifying. They stood 7 feet tall, humanoid but disproportionate. Their limbs were too long, their joints articulation backward like a dog's legs. But it was their armor that froze my blood. They were encased in the black obsidian stone. It wasn't worn like a suit, it grew out of them. The shiny black rock formed plates over their chests, shoulders, and heads. Between the plates, I could see the raw red muscle fiber of the wood underneath. They didn't have faces, just that single vertical slit down the center of the obsidian helmet, and inside that slit, a purple light glowed. "Contact front!" I screamed. "Light 'em up!" The chamber erupted in noise. The deafening roar of our M4 carbines in the enclosed space was blinding. I fired a controlled burst at the lead creature, aiming for center mass. Clang, clang, clang. Sparks flew. The bullets hit the obsidian chest plate and shattered. They didn't penetrate. They didn't even scratch it. It was like shooting at a tank with a BB gun. "Effective fire! They're armored!" Miller yelled, switching his aim to the creature's legs. He hit the exposed wood at the knee. The creature stumbled, a spray of red sap exploding from the wound. It let out a sound, not a scream, but a high-pitched, digital screech that sounded like a modem connecting to hell. But it didn't fall. The wood knit itself back together in seconds. The wound closed. "They heal," Doc shouted, reloading with trembling hands. "Regeneration!" The Guardians charged. They moved with a terrifying fluid speed that shouldn't have been possible for something made of stone. The lead creature closed the distance to Ruiz in a heartbeat. Ruiz panicked. He emptied his pistol blindly, screaming incoherently. The bullets sparked harmlessly off the creature's faceplate. "Ruiz, move!" I lunged forward, but I was too late. The Guardian didn't punch him. It opened. The obsidian plates on its chest split apart like a ribcage, revealing a mass of writhing white thorns inside. It grabbed Ruiz with its long stone arms and pulled him into the cavity. "No! No! Please!" Ruiz shrieked. The plates slammed shut. The sound of crunching bone and tearing Kevlar echoed through the chamber. Ruiz's screams were cut off instantly, replaced by a wet, slurping sound. The Guardian stood there, vibrating, as the purple light in its visor turned a deep, angry crimson. It was processing him, converting him. "Ruiz is gone!" I yelled, suppressing the urge to vomit. "Fall back! Grenades! Use the grenades!" Miller pulled a frag grenade, pulled the pin, and bowled it toward the group of creatures. "Fire in the hole!" We dove behind a cluster of thick roots just as the grenade detonated. Boom! The shockwave knocked the wind out of me again. The explosion tore through the mist. When I looked up, 2 of the Guardians were down. The blast had shattered their stone armor, exposing the soft wooden core. They were thrashing on the ground, leaking red fluid, trying to rebuild themselves, but 3 more were stepping over them, unharmed. "It's not enough," Doc yelled. "We can't kill them all." "We need to find the core," I shouted, scrambling up. "If this is a machine, it has an off switch, or a power source. Where is that purple energy coming from?" "Down!" Miller pointed to a massive shaft in the center of the room. The Guardians were guarding it. "They are protecting that drop." "That's our exit," I said, reloading a fresh magazine. "We have to punch through." "Captain, that's suicide," Miller said, staring at the wall of monsters. "Staying here is suicide. We are running out of ammo, and they are getting faster." I looked at the creatures. The one that had eaten Ruiz was changing. It was getting bigger. Its armor was thickening. It had used Ruiz's biomass to upgrade itself. Listen to me. I grabbed my men by their vests. We run in a wedge. Continuous fire. Aim for the joints. Don't stop for anything. If one of us goes down, we leave him. Do you understand? We leave him. They nodded, eyes wide with the adrenaline of death. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute! We charged. We ran straight at the nightmares. I held the trigger down, spraying bullets at the knee joints and neck seams of the nearest guardian. The sheer volume of fire forced it to stagger back. Miller was screaming a war cry, throwing his last flashbang grenade to blind them. Flash! The white light stunned them for a second. Their optical sensors overloaded. In that second, we sprinted past them. I felt a cold stone hand brush against my backpack, tearing the fabric, but I kept running. We reached the edge of the central shaft. I looked down. It was a vertical drop, glowing with a blinding violet light. I couldn't see the bottom. I could only hear a massive, rhythmic pounding, like a heartbeat the size of a building. Jump! I ordered. Into that! Doc hesitated. Behind us, the Guardians had recovered. The Ruiz Guardian stepped forward. The slit on its face opened, and this time, it spoke with Ruiz's voice, perfectly clear. Join us, Captain. It is beautiful inside. I didn't answer. I kicked Doc into the hole, grabbed Miller, and we jumped into the violet abyss. As we fell towards the heart of the machine, I realized one thing. The gunfight was just the foreplay. We weren't fighting soldiers. We were fighting an immune system, and we were the virus. I expected to hit the bottom and die. I expected the crunch of bone against stone. Instead, I hit something thick, warm, and viscous. It felt like falling into a pool of warm honey or coagulating blood. My momentum was arrested instantly, but gently. I was suspended in a fluid that glowed with that same sickly, violet hue. I thrashed, trying to swim to the surface, but there was no surface. There was no up or down, just the fluid. Panic set in. I held my breath, my lungs burning, waiting for the inevitable drowning. But as the seconds ticked by, 30, 60, 90, I realized something impossible. I didn't need to breathe. The fluid was oxygenated. It was filling my nose, my throat, entering my lungs, but I wasn't choking. It felt cool and electric inside my chest. I opened my eyes. The liquid was translucent. Floating near me were Miller and Doc. They looked like fetuses in a womb, their limbs relaxed, their eyes wide open and staring at nothing. Captain. The voice didn't come from the comms. It didn't travel through the liquid. It bloomed directly inside my parietal lobe. It was my mother's voice. She died 10 years ago. Let go, Jack. You've been carrying the rucksack for too long. Put it down. Get out of my head, I tried to scream, but no sound came out, only a stream of silver bubbles. I kicked hard, propelling myself towards what looked like a solid edge. My boots hit a membrane, soft, like the lining of a stomach, and I pushed through it. I tumbled out of the suspension fluid and landed on a spongy, moss-covered floor. I coughed, hacking up the violet slime. It tasted sweet, dangerously sweet. Miller, Doc, wake up! I grabbed Miller by his collar and hauled him out of the membrane. He was heavy, dead weight. I slapped his face. Miller! Miller gasped, his eyes focusing slowly. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, a blissful smile on his face. She's here, Cap, Miller whispered, tears mixing with the slime on his cheeks. Sarah, she's making breakfast. Can't you smell the bacon? Miller, Sarah is gone. You're in a hole in the jungle. Snap out of it. No. Miller pushed me away, his strength surprising me. She forgave me. She says the cancer didn't hurt. She says this place took the pain away. It's warm here. He started walking, not towards an exit, but towards the wall. The walls of this chamber were not stone. They were vast, pulsating screens of biological matter. They were displaying images, not projections, but memories. I saw Miller's wedding. I saw him holding his son. The images were crisp, perfect, more real than reality. Don't look at it! I tackled Miller. pinning him to the ground. It's a digestive enzyme, Miller. It's digesting your mind before it eats your body. Fight it. Let him go, Captain. I turned. Doc was standing near the center of the room. He wasn't hallucinating a lost love. He was staring at a massive column of light that connected the floor to the ceiling. Inside the column, data was flowing. Biological data, DNA strands, star charts, mathematical equations that shifted and evolved in real time. Doc looked terrifying. His eyes were bleeding, the capillaries burst from strain, but he was grinning like a madman. I see it, Doc rasped. The math. It solves everything. The unified field theory, the cure for aging, the origin of the species. It's all here. Doc, we need to move, I said, struggling to keep Miller pinned while reaching for my sidearm. You don't understand. Doc walked closer to the light column. He raised his hand to touch it. This isn't an invasion. It's a correction. They've been here before, Captain. They aren't aliens. They are the gardeners. Humanity, we are just the weeds that grew back while they were away. What are you talking about? The cycles. Doc pointed to the wall. The images shifted. I saw cities burning. Not modern cities. I saw Rome. I saw Tenochtitlan. I saw ziggurats in Sumeria. And in every image, I saw the black pyramids rising from the earth to cleanse the civilization. Every 10,000 years, Doc muttered. When the species gets too aggressive, when we start destroying the petri dish, the immune system activates. The green hell isn't just a forest, it's a reset button. I don't care what it is, I growled, pointing my pistol at the light column. I'm turning it off. You can't, a new voice spoke. It wasn't Miller. It wasn't Doc. It was a chorus. Thousands of voices layered on top of each other. Men, women, children. The voices of the cartel members. The voices of the missing Spetsnaz from the 80s. The voices of conquistadors. The hive mind. The shadows in the room coalesced. The moss on the floor rose up and formed a shape. It was a humanoid figure, but it had no distinct features. It was made of pure green light and roots. Why do you resist, Captain Nightwhisper? The entity asked. Its voice vibrated in my teeth. Your friend Miller is happy. He is living in his favorite memory, forever. Your friend the Doctor is learning the secrets of the universe. We give you what you want. We take away the fear. We take away the loneliness. Join the Kovan, the hive. I felt a pull, a physical tug in the center of my chest. Suddenly, I wasn't in the jungle. I was back in Kandahar. I was in the cave. The giant was dead. My old squad was alive. They were laughing, drinking beer. The sun was warm. There was no PTSD, no nightmares, just peace. It's nice here, isn't it, Jack? My old sergeant asked, handing me a cold beer. Stay. Put down the gun. The gun felt heavy. So heavy. My finger relaxed on the trigger. Why was I fighting? What was the point? Everyone I loved was either dead or leaving. Here, they were all alive. Yes, I whispered. I'm tired. Captain! The scream broke the illusion. It was pain. Sharp, blinding pain. Miller had bitten my hand. Hard. He had bitten through the glove and into the flesh. The pain anchored me. The Kandahar sun vanished. The cold beer turned into violet slime. I was back in the nightmare. Miller was trembling, blood running down of his chin. He looked terrified. I saw her turn into wood, Cap. I kissed her, and she turned into bark. It's a lie. It's all a lie. I kicked the green figure. My boot passed right through it, but the disruption caused the hologram to flicker. Doc, get away from the light, I yelled. Doc didn't listen. He had both hands on the column now. His skin was turning gray. Veins of violet light were shooting up his arms, infecting his bloodstream. It's beautiful, Doc whispered. I can hear the music of the spheres. Doc, no! I raised my weapon. I didn't want to do it, but he was gone. He wasn't Doc anymore. He was an input terminal for the machine. Bang! I shot the column of light just above Doc's head. The glass, or whatever material it was, shattered. A blast of pure energy exploded outward. It knocked Doc backward, severing his connection. He hit the floor, convulsing, smoke rising from his hands. The hive mind screamed. It wasn't a voice this time. It was a psychic shockwave. Error. Contamination detected. Purge protocol initiated. The peaceful hallucinations vanished. The walls turned a deep, angry red. The floor began to heat up. The comforting womb was turning into a stomach. "Grab Doc!" I shouted to Miller. "Where are we going?" Miller yelled, hoisting the unconscious medic over his shoulder. "Deeper." I pointed to a massive, pulsating valve at the far end of the chamber that had just opened due to the short circuit. "We go to the heart. We kill it before it kills us." We ran towards the valve. Behind us, the memories on the walls reached out, physical hands made of light and shadow, trying to drag us back into the simulation. As we crossed the threshold, I heard the hive mind one last time. It sounded disappointed, like a parent scolding a child. "You choose pain over peace. Typical humans. You are so in love with your own suffering." "Yeah," I spat, sealing the valve behind us. "It's what makes us real." We were out of the mind trap, but we had stepped into something worse. The corridor ahead wasn't stone or machine. It was flesh, giant, beating, muscular walls. We were inside the heart, and it was waking up. The corridor leading to the core was not built for humans. It wasn't even built for the Guardians. It was a throat. "Miller, how is he?" I shouted over the deafening rhythm that shook the entire structure. Thump, hiss, thump, hiss. "He's burning up, Cap," Miller yelled back, dragging Doc's unconscious body through the slime. "His veins are glowing. Look at his neck." I glanced back. The violet infection was spreading. The veins in Doc's neck were bulging and pulsing with their own light, syncing with the heartbeat of the pyramid. He was becoming a component. "We have to be fast," I said, checking my vest. "I have 4 blocks of C4 left. You?" 3 blocks and 2 detonators, Miller replied, his face grim. The hallucinations from the previous chamber had left him hollow, but focused. He had seen his dead wife, and he had rejected the lie. Now he just wanted to burn the place down. We reached the end of the throat. A massive sphincter-like valve blocked our path. As we approached, it didn't require a keycard or a code. It sensed our body heat. It sensed our foreign biology. The valve dilated, opening with a wet, tearing sound. A blast of hot, humid air hit us, carrying a smell that I will never forget. It smelled like a newborn baby and a slaughterhouse mixed together, the smell of raw, unadulterated creation. We stepped into the sanctum. It was a spherical chamber, easily the size of a football stadium. The walls were lined with thousands of translucent sacs, each containing a fetus-like shape. Some looked human, some looked like the Guardians, some looked like things that had no name, nightmare hybrids of reptile, plant, and machine. But they were ignored. Our eyes were drawn to the center. Suspended in the middle of the room, held in place by beams of anti-gravity light, was the seed. It was a heart, but it was also a computer. A massive black object, roughly 40 feet tall, shaped like a pine cone. But the scales of the cone were shifting obsidian plates. Between the plates, a blinding white light, not violet, but pure white starfire, pulsed with every beat. Thump! The shockwave knocked us to our knees. This wasn't just sound. It was a gravity wave. The heart was bending the space around it. "My God!" Doc moaned. He had woken up. He was staring at the seed with eyes that were now entirely black, filled with the violet infection. "Doc, can you walk?" I asked, pulling him up. "It's the Ark," Doc whispered, a line of bloody drool running down his chin. "Don't you see, Captain? It's a backup drive. This planet, it's just a petri dish. They wipe it clean, plant the seed, and wait for the new garden to grow. We are the compost." "Not today," I growled. "Miller, prep the charges. We are blowing this thing to hell." "You can't," Doc laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. "It's protected. Look at the moat." I looked down. Below the suspended seed, there was a pool of liquid. But it wasn't water. It was the same gray nanite sludge we saw in the dead zone outside. It was swirling, forming shapes. As Miller pulled the C4 from his pack, the pool erupted. Guardians didn't come out this time. Something else did. They looked like white blood cells, if cells were the size of wolves, and made of liquid glass. They had no distinct shape, just flowing, shifting forms with serrated blades for limbs. The antibodies. "Contact!" I screamed, raising my rifle. I fired at the nearest shape. The bullets passed right through the liquid glass, causing ripples but no damage. The creature reformed instantly and lunged. It hit me in the chest, knocking me backward. It didn't cut me. It burned me. The glass was chemically acidic. My tactical vest sizzled and smoked. "Fire is useless!" Miller yelled, kicking one away. "They're liquid! The charges!" I shouted, scrambling to my feet. "Get to the seed! We have to plant them directly on the shell!" "I'll cover you!" Miller roared. He did something I didn't expect. He dropped his rifle and pulled the pins on 2 fragmentation grenades. "Come on, you ugly bastards! Over here!" He ran to the left, away from the seed, drawing the antibodies' attention. The creatures, sensing the immediate threat of the explosives, swarmed him. "Miller, don't! Go, Cap! Finish the mission!" Miller threw the grenades at his own feet just as the swarm overtook him. Boom! The explosion was deafening in the echo chamber. The blast wave vaporized the liquid creatures, turning them into a mist of acid. Miller was gone, vaporized. He had bought me 10 seconds. I didn't waste them. I grabbed Doc, who was now just dead weight, mumbling equations, and dragged him towards the suspended ramp that led to the seed. I ran. My lungs were burning, my legs felt like lead. I reached the seed. Up close, the heat was blistering. My eyebrows singed off instantly. The sound of the heartbeat was so loud, it was causing hemorrhages in my eyes. My vision was turning red. I slapped the 4 blocks of C4 onto the black obsidian plates. The seed reacted. The plates shifted, trying to crush my hand. I pulled back just in time, losing a glove. I jammed the detonators in, wired them together. I set the timer. 3 minutes. "Why?" Doc whispered. He was looking at the C4. "Why destroy perfection?" "Because it's not ours," I spat, arming the device. The red light on the detonator blinked. Beep. Suddenly, the seed stopped beating. The white light turned red. The chamber went silent. Then a voice spoke. Not in my head, in the room. It came from the seed itself. It was a vibration that shook the fillings in my teeth. "Intervention detected. Sterilization protocol active." The sacks on the walls, the thousands of fetuses, began to open. They were waking up. All of them. "Run," I told myself. I grabbed Doc by his harness and turned back towards the throat. But the throat was closing. The muscle sphincter was tightening. "We're trapped," Doc giggled. "We're going to be part of the soup, Captain." No, I saw a ventilation shaft near the floor. It was small, barely wide enough for a man, but it was venting steam. It led out. "We are leaving." I shoved Doc into the vent. He screamed as the hot metal burned his skin, but I kept pushing. I crawled in after him, just as the first wave of hatchlings hit the platform where we had been standing. We were in the veins of the pyramid now, crawling through the dark, hot intestine of a dying god. Behind us, the timer was ticking down. 2 minutes, 1 minute. I could hear the screeches of 1,000 nightmares chasing us through the pipes. "Keep moving, Doc! Move or I'll shoot you myself!" We fell out of the vent and hit the cold ash of the dead zone outside. We had made it out of the structure, but we weren't safe. 30 seconds, I yelled, dragging Doc across the grey dust. The jungle around the pyramid was thrashing. The garden knew what was coming. The trees were screaming. We dove behind a ridge of rock at the edge of the crater. "Cover your ears! Open your mouth!" 3, 2, 1. The world turned white. We hit the grey dirt of the dead zone hard, covering our heads just as the timer hit 0. For a microsecond, there was silence. The kind of silence that feels like the air is being sucked out of the world. Then the ground beneath us buckled. Crack, boom! The sound wasn't an explosion. It was a scream. A tectonic, metallic scream that shattered the eardrums of every living thing within 10 miles. I looked back, shielding my eyes against the glare. The Black Pyramid didn't just collapse. It cracked open like a rotten egg. The obsidian shell fractured into 1,000,000 pieces, and from the cracks, a blinding white light poured out. The C4 had detonated directly on the seed. We had cracked the core. A shockwave of pure energy rippled outward. It hit the ring of trees surrounding the dead zone. The trees didn't bend. They disintegrated. The first row of the garden was vaporized instantly, turning into a cloud of green mist. "Doc, get up!" I screamed, hauling the medic to his feet. He was heavy, his skin burning hot to the touch. The violet veins in his neck were pulsing erratically now, out of sync with the dead machine. "You killed it," Doc mumbled, staring at the burning ruin. "You killed God." "I killed a machine," I shouted, checking my radio. The static was gone. With the pyramid destroyed, the jamming signal was dead. Command! This is Alpha 1, Broken Arrow. I say again, Broken Arrow. Sector 7G is overrun. Requesting immediate extraction and sterilization. Danger close." The radio crackled, a beautiful sound. "Alpha 1, this is Overlord. We read you 5 by 5. Assets are inbound. ETA 2 minutes. Pop smoke." 2 minutes! I grabbed Doc and started dragging him towards the edge of the ash circle. "We have to move!" But the jungle wasn't dead. It was furious. The shockwave had destroyed the first line of trees, but the rest of the forest was reacting to the death of its heart. The ground beyond the ash circle began to boil. Massive roots, thick as subway trains, burst from the earth, thrashing wildly. The canopy descended, closing off the sky. The forest was trying to seal the wound. It was trying to keep us in. We reached the edge of the gray ash. Beyond it lay the green hell we had to cross to reach the extraction point. "We can't go in there," Doc laughed, a wet, rattling sound. "Look at them." I looked. The Guardians, the ones that hadn't been inside the pyramid, were emerging from the trees. Hundreds of them. Their obsidian armor was cracked, their movements jerky and uncoordinated, without the central mind to control them. But they were driven by pure rage. They screeched, a sound like tearing metal, and charged towards us. "Hold the line!" I dropped Doc and raised my rifle. I had 2 magazines left, 60 rounds against an army. I fired single shots, aiming for the exposed wood beneath their cracked armor. Bang! A Guardian fell. Bang! Another stumbled, but there were too many. They crossed onto the ash, their feet burning on the dead soil, but they didn't care. They wanted blood. "Overlord, where is that air support?" I screamed into the mic. "Look up, Captain," the voice on the radio replied. I heard it before I saw it, the low, guttural roar of jet engines. 2 A-10 warthogs dropped out of the clouds, diving towards the jungle canopy like birds of prey. "Danger close," I whispered, tackling Doc to the ground. Bert! The sound of the GAU-8 Avenger cannons tore the sky apart. A line of depleted uranium shells shredded the advancing wave of Guardians. The obsidian armor shattered like glass. The wooden bodies exploded into splinters. Then came the fire. The jets dropped their payload. Napalm canisters tumbled through the air, end over end. They hit the tree line just 50 meters from our position. Whoosh! The world turned orange. A wall of liquid fire rose up, consuming the jungle. The screams of the Guardians were drowned out by the roar of the flames. Napalm sticks to everything. It stuck to the trees, it stuck to the vines, it stuck to the monsters. The garden burned. It didn't burn like normal wood. It burned with a green flame, releasing black smoke that smelled of burning hair and ozone. "Extraction is inbound! LZ is hot!" the pilot shouted. Through the wall of smoke, I saw the silhouette of a Black Hawk helicopter descending. The rotor wash pushed the flames back, creating a small pocket of clear air. "Go! Go!" I picked up Doc. He was convulsing now, black fluid leaking from his eyes. We ran towards the bird. The heat was intense. The soles of my boots were melting. I threw Doc into the cabin. "Miller," the crew chief yelled, looking past me. "Where is the rest of the squad?" "Gone." I climbed aboard. "Just go. Get us out of here." The helicopter lifted off, banking hard to avoid the pillars of fire. I sat in the open doorway, my legs dangling out, looking down at the nightmare we were leaving behind. From the air, I saw the scale of it. The Black Pyramid was a smoking crater. The dead zone was expanding as the fire consumed the forest. But at the very edge of the flames, I saw something that froze my blood. The fire wasn't killing everything. Some of the trees were moving away from the flames. uprooting themselves and walking deeper into the dark, untouched parts of the Amazon, carrying their secrets with them. We hadn't killed it. We had just amputated a limb. Doc grabbed my arm. His grip was iron. I looked at him. His eyes were no longer black. They were clear, but there was a sadness in them that broke my heart. "Captain," he whispered, pointing at his own chest. I looked. Under his torn uniform, where the skin should have been burned or bruised, there was a small green shoot growing out of his sternum, a tiny, delicate sapling with a single black leaf. "It's not over," Doc smiled, and then he closed his eyes. We bombed Sector 7G for 3 days straight. Napalm, white phosphorus, bunker busters. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but a scar on the face of the earth, a crater of glass and ash. The official report said it was a cartel drug lab that went critical. They said the strange biological readings were due to toxic chemicals used in cocaine production. They gave Miller a posthumous medal. They gave me a discharge and a pension. Doc didn't make it back. He died on the chopper. Or at least, the man who was Doc died. The autopsy report is classified, but I have a friend in the morgue. He told me that when they opened Doc's chest, there was no heart, just a root ball. I try not to think about it. I try to live a normal life. I live in Arizona now, the desert, where nothing grows, where it's too dry for moss, too hot for vines. But lately, I've had this cough. I went to the doctor yesterday. He took an X-ray of my lungs. He looked confused. He asked me if I had inhaled any strange particles recently. I looked at the X-ray on the light box. In the lower lobe of my left lung, there was a shadow. It wasn't a tumor. It wasn't fluid. It looked like a fern, unfurling. The pyramid is gone. The garden burned. But spores can travel thousands of miles in the wind. They can wait in your lungs for years, waiting for the right season. I can feel it tickling my throat right now. It wants to speak. This is Captain Nightwhisper. If you live near a forest, and you hear the trees creaking when there is no wind, close your windows, and if you start coughing, pray it's just a cold, because the harvest isn't over. It's just beginning.